Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Banish the Snakes. Now this is a pure co-op game which simulates Ireland in the 5th century when the Roman Empire was collapsing and Ireland was turning to the Christian religion. Now the player is going to be taking on the roles of various saints who are going throughout Ireland converting the local people to the Christian faith. Now you must work together to convert the people of Ireland before the barbarians completely overwhelm all of Britain. If you fail, the Irish will not be able to save civilization in the following centuries. Now I'm almost always intrigued by GMT games as they're often based on history, and this game is no different. Now the basics of the gameplay are pretty straightforward. On your turn you're going to flip over an event card and something's going to happen. And although we've seen this lots in cooperative games, I do like how they handle it in this game. There's an arrow on the current event card, and when you flip the new event over, you will do a piece of the event that the previous card points to. It definitely changes up the flow of the game and increases the amount of possible events that happen during the game. In subsequent games, even if the same card comes up, depending on the preceding card, something else might happen on it, so I really enjoyed that. Now once that piece of your turn is done, it does go into a fairly standard actions, move, build, and trade with other players, or prepare and convert. This is probably the action you're going to be concentrating on for the entire game as you progress towards the end game. But even if you convert an entire region with the people, chief, and king, it doesn't always mean that they're going to stay that way. Those event cards can dramatically change the state of the board, which some people like and some people didn't like. So, will this game be like St. Patrick himself and be remembered for all times? Or will it just be forgotten like many of the other members of the church? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back with my final thoughts on Banish the Snakes. So here's Banish the Snakes set up for 3 players. Place the appropriate indicators in their starting spots. Then on the main board, each space that is marked as a people, place a random people token with the pagan side up, making sure that they are in order from lowest on the left to the highest on the right. Then randomly place a leader token in each chief, king, and high king boxes on the board. Then add 1 druid, number side down, to each druid box on the board. The churches, dolmens, and grave tokens are placed off to one side. The gift of the spirit cards are placed to the side as well. For the event cards, you're going to remove all the ones that say from Scotland, from Strathclyde, and from England and place them in their appropriate boxes. The Arthur, King of the Britons card is placed in the key card area, and all the other event cards are shuffled. For the player setup, each one gets a player board with markers of their color. Choose, from the starting saints, each player's starting saint. Then add 6 of the non-pick saint cards from the deck set to the event cards. So if you decide to start with the historic saints, you're going to pick from the 6 at start saints, and the 6 historical deck saints go into the event deck. There should never be any saints in the event deck that are currently in play. Place your zeal marker in the leftmost spot with your action marker in the force section, unless your saint said otherwise. Players can choose where on the board they want to start, with some exceptions based on your saints. During a game round, players will take turns revealing an event and taking their actions. The game continues until all the people markers on the board are flipped to their Christian flock side, in which case the player wins. Even if some of the leaders are still pagan, as long as all the people ones are to the Christian flock side, the players win. If this does not happen, then if the paganism in Great Britain marker reaches the game end box, or you run out of event cards, or if an acolyte dies, the game ends immediately and you count up the points based on the rulebook to see how you've done. So let's go through a player's turn. First, they're going to flip over the top event card and use the key card to determine what event happens. You're going to be using the arrow from the key card and you line it with the new card and perform that event. Then you move the old key card to the discard pile and the new event card is now the new key card. Then the players will take their actions. The number of actions you perform will be dictated by your zeal. As your zeal goes down, you're going to be doing less actions per round. For an action, you can move to an adjacent area. Now there are several regions controlled by a king, and within each region you're going to have 2 or 3 areas controlled by a chief. Moving across a line, either solid or dotted, is just an action. If the druid spot in an area is empty, you can build or improve a church. They always start at level 0, and they can go all the way up to a cathedral. You can only build or improve a church once per turn in each area, but you can build in one area, move, and then build in a second area, for example. Churches provide positive modifiers in area when trying to convert the chief or the king. If you're in the same area as another saint, you can give or take cards for an action. If a saint has died and there is a grave mark on the area, you can convert it to a relic for an action. Now the only other actions are really combined, and they are the most important actions you're going to be doing in the game. They are the prepare and the convert action. I'll talk about the convert action mainly, as the prepare action just gives you a +1 to your convert action, and the prepare action can be done multiple times before you do the convert. When you are in an area, the convert action is used to switch the people from pagan to Christian, and there's a hierarchy of influence. First, if there is a druid in the area that's face down, you cannot do any other convert actions until you've converted the druid or just revealed it. So in this area here, we have a face down druid. To convert, you first prepare for a number of actions. Each prepare gives you a +1 to your roll. Then you're going to do the next action, which is going to be convert. So for here, I'm going to prepare once, which gives me a +1. Then my next action is to try and convert. So I flip the druid over and see that it's a -4. So we set our slider to -4. And since we prepared once, we move the slider one spot to the right. So now I have to roll a 4 or better. If you beat the minimum result number needed, you succeed in the conversion. For a druid, it just means you remove the druid from the board. For any other people or leaders or chief or king, you're going to flip them over to the Christian side. If you meet the value that you need, nothing happens. But if you roll lower, you have failed and you're going to be losing zeal. And if you fail to a druid, you also have to place a dolmen in the area, which makes subsequent rolls more difficult. Now once the druid is removed or revealed, you can attempt to convert the other people or leaders in the area, and there's going to be an influence by political hierarchy. So to convert this -2 pagan person, I have to add the local chief to that. If I want to do the chief, I have to include the local king, and to do the king, I have to do the high king, etc. There are the modifiers such as the dolmens, churches, relics, druids, etc. that will give you modifiers to this roll. But whatever the final minimum result is needed, it works the same way. Exceed converts, ties mean nothing, and less means that you lose zeal. If you lose all your zeal and your saint dies, you place a grave marker in that area. If you collected a saint card from the event deck, you'll come back as a saint following the previous saint's footsteps. If you do not have a saint in your kept cards, you flip your player board over and come back as an acolyte. Now if you get a saint while you're an acolyte, you flip your card back over and you become that new saint. There's also a final effort action you can do. If your zeal is on the last space, you get a +2 to roll, but your saint will die automatically after that attempt. Now I've skipped over several other details, especially in the hierarchy of influence when converting, but those are the actions you're going to be doing on your turn. I've also skipped over the gifts of the spirit cards. You'll be earning those through various event cards and are generally very powerful cards you want to collect. The last thing to mention is as the paganism marker moves, if it crosses over one of the lines for a different country, you'll be adding those cards to the deck. Now the game is going to continue until either all the people in Ireland are converted to Christianity, in which case all the players win, or if the paganism marker reaches the end, an acolyte dies, or you run out of event cards, you'll just calculate points as outlined in the rulebook to see how you fared. And that's essentially how you play. Now let's get back to see what I thought about Banish the Snakes. Now on to theme and components. The theme in this one is definitely one of the highlights for me. And the theme is it's a more historical time period than a religious theme. The event cards represent the changes of society at the time. People changing their positions, or inter-country fighting, or internal rebellions, that sort of thing. For me, the theme is solely carried by the cards, and they do it very well. Now there is also a book in the box which covers the background of the saints depicted in the game, along with some notable, event cards. So the gameplay itself feels more mechanical than thematic, but the theme is definitely implemented, and that's kind of keep me coming back to wanting to try this game again. For the components, they're okay. What I would classify as GMT standard. You have to sticker all the blocks yourself in the game. The main board is pretty bland. The cards do look nice and are of good quality. The rulebook itself does a good job of teaching the game, but there are definitely some oversights. A few of the saints start with certain changes. They have less zeal, or they start in certain areas of the board. That information is only in one little paragraph in the rulebook. It's not on the saint's card, and I don't know why it is. I also wish that they included just a few bags or something for drawing the leaders and people. Often you need to be drawing new leaders or people, and you want to make sure you don't see them. Often we just ended up using the box lid to put them in. It's no big deal, but it would have been a nice to have. So the components for a GMT game are standard, but compared to other board games that are out now, I would say they're probably even substandard. Now on to the gameplay. If you've seen the overview, you're going to think this game looks pretty straightforward and easy to win. There is a big wrinkle though, and that's the event cards, and a particular one especially. You're often going to get the king is disposed, which means you remove that king from the area and often have to remove other things as well, like maybe remove the chief, some people, which you're always going to be removing your Christian flock first, and maybe even a church. Then there's this whole action to reseed them all. It's interesting, but it does slow down the game. The rulebook does a good job of describing how to do it, but will often take you a few minutes to go through it all, having to figure out and roll the die to figure out who's going to ascend. Now these cards mean that nowhere is safe. You can never completely convert an area, all the people, chiefs, and kings, but this still doesn't mean that might not change in the future. This strikes me as a little, off. In Pandemic, if you've completely cured a disease, you don't have to worry about that disease anymore. In this game, you can never turn your back on a region because you never know what's going to change. You have to go into the game knowing this, and it can be a little annoying to have to go back and reconvert a bunch of people and leaders in an area, especially if it's in a region where there are no players anymore. Now, I understand why this happens, both thematic-wise and game-wise, as without these cards, the game would definitely be too easy, and they definitely raise the tension of the game when you're flipping over that event card. I know it might sound like I'm complaining about these cards, and maybe I am a little bit, but only because they can really mess up your plans. The event cards are, I feel, the lifeblood of this game. The actual actions you're doing on your turn, they're actually kind of boring. You spend most of your turns preparing and then doing a conversion attempt. Sometimes you'll do a move and build a church, but you should almost always be doing a conversion on every turn. And that piece is just not as interesting to me as the event cards. I do like that there needs to be table talk, as some saints can aid other saints, or some saints are good at converting leaders, so you want to have them using their special abilities, and that's very important. I also like the balance between being cautious while doing a conversion attempt. How many times do you actually need to prepare? Will you try and do maybe more than one conversion on a turn? But the risk of losing zeal and therefore action points is definitely something that you need to consider when making that option. I also like that sometimes losing your saint just may be the best action. If you're getting low on zeal and action points, then maybe be more aggressive on those conversions and prepare less. And if you have a saint in reserve, it's definitely something that shouldn't be discounted. Now, my problem with the game is a lot of the things that I really like about the game are kind of outside of the core actions you're doing on your turn. The event cards, the planning amongst players, even the intentionally dying to come back as another saint. These are all really interesting pieces of the game. But, and this is what kind of holds this game back for me, the actual gameplay itself, the actions you're doing on every single turn, seem less interesting. Not bad, but it seems like almost every turn in this game, I'm going to be doing conversion action. There's not much else you do. Yes, churches are important, but really only in support of those conversion actions. So, would I recommend this game? I think if the theme interests you at all, if you're interested in the historic time period and the upheaval that was happening in Britain at the time, then I would recommend this game. But if you're not interested in the theme, I'm not sure I'd recommend the game based solely on the gameplay. Now, I really, really like the theme in this one. The event cards were, for me anyway, by far the best and most interesting part of the game. I love that mechanism of using the arrow to find out what happens next. Often there's an event that maybe always goes off on the card, but the specifics might change based on that arrow mechanism. It's a little thing, but it means that from game to game, even if you know the cards back to front, you never know how they're going to play out. I also like that since your action pool is so limited, it really does promote teamwork. Planning on who will go where, based on their strengths, is definitely critical. One thing in the overview that I didn't mention is the kept cards. Some of those event cards you can actually keep. They're good cards and can be used later, but you can only keep so many of them, so deciding to keep a strong ability or maybe an extra saint is definitely an interesting decision to make. I also like the difficulty of the game. I always felt like I was in a good place within the game. We've converted several regions and areas, then bam, something hits and the kings and chiefs get all shuffled around due to some internal conflict, and a lot of your hard work needs to be redone. But that can also be the downside as well. The game is very random, and it's difficult to mitigate those events. You have really no control how the cards are going to come out. There's no way to stack the deck or protect certain regions. You can have rounds of effort by players just wiped out by the flip of one card. I also found the actual gameplay itself, the actions you're doing from turn to turn, are really not that interesting. There's only one real core action that you're going to be doing almost every single turn, and I do wish there were some other things you could do to maybe help mitigate against these cards, the event cards I should say. Each game you play, you're going to be approaching it almost identically. The core idea is to convert the people, and there's really only one way to do it, and that's really the only thing that matters. So overall, I'm going to give this game a low 7 out of 10 in the Dice Tower seal of approval. I do like the game, and the theme for me definitely pushes it up to a 7. I think if it was a theme I wasn't interested in, it's definitely going to be a point or two lower. If you take the theme completely out of the game, I'm not sure the game stands on its own. But if the theme interests you, or you like historical games, then this is one you should probably give a try to. And that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.